Welcome, everyone. This is Juan Soto, Chapter President of AccessUserGroups.org, SQL Server with Access. We are glad to have you here today. We're going to be talking about, this will be a third session of Access with SQL Server Academy. If you haven't attended the other two sessions, I urge you to check out their recordings on YouTube channel. And George, who's here with me, he's going to probably post that in the comments here, our official YouTube channel for SQL Server with Access. I've appointed George our online moderator to insert links throughout the evening. So make sure you have that chat window open so you can see the links that George has provided me. I am going to share my desktop now. And let's take a look. I'm going to share screen number 2. There you go. Okay. I'll ask you guys to mute your microphones until the end of the presentation, and then we can unmute them to ask questions later. And let me just open the chat assistant so I can see any comments that you make during the presentation. Let's see here. Chat, there you go. All right. I got the chat window up. And George, do you mind helping me out by putting the link to our YouTube channel there? Chat, thanks. All right, well, look, let's go ahead and get started with some really good announcements from the Microsoft Access team. I just created a post on AccessExperts.com, and I'm going to put the link to that post here. And it talks about the latest and greatest from when it's happening with Access, and I'm excited about this development. I'll tell you why. And by the way, before we get started, can you guys hear me okay? Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear me fine. George says I'm good. All right. So one of the things that I'm excited about is this data connector. I put the link to the blog post in the chat comments. This is a Dataverse connector for Microsoft Access. You know, over the years, Access has developed a set of custom data connectors. I'll show you that here. I got the Access application up here. And if you go to external data, I believe, I haven't used this in a while, so bear with me, do data source. These are called data connectors, right? And you can do SharePoint list, Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, data services. And there'll be a new one here, I believe, for Dataverse. And that you can add. I haven't tested it yet, but you can join the public beta. I'll show you that and how to do that in a second here. But these are data connectors that were created from the Access team and the Microsoft Access program. Now, when they first came out with this, I was a little bit disappointed because PowerApps has a ton of data connectors, right? You can connect, I mean, if I were to show you the data connectors available in PowerApps, which I'm going to do now here, it really is unbelievable. And let me see if I can just show you the vast amount of data connectors that they have. And here, see, look, this is just a small fraction of it. So I'm going to put this in the chat comments as well. And I got to make sure I take a transcription of this chat comments so that when I head with George, who's my editor, video editor, uploads video later on YouTube, we can put these comments in our YouTube video. But you know, these connectors were already here when the Access team decided to go their own route with their own connectors. And you know, I'm sure there's probably a good technical reason why they didn't use these connectors from Dataverse and leverage the resources that Microsoft is already investing in PowerApps. But it is what it is, right? So data connectors, the latest one has been announced is the one for Dataverse here. And Michael Aldridge, who's the Access Program Manager, he sent us all an email, and I just literally copied and pasted it here. I enhanced his email by adding links to these images. So if you were to click on the image, it'll take you to that particular post. But it's rich with information, right? You've got the Microsoft Access data to Microsoft Dataverse, and I'll be talking about in a second here about that. And then Access Help and Learning. This is a new site that got launched recently as well. The Access Development Community, where you can join the public beta to test this new Dataverse connector, and on it goes. I'm not going to hash the entire blog post, but you can see a lot of these here and read up about it. And there was even the video at Microsoft Ignite last week where Aldridge, who's on the right-hand side here, and the senior program manager for Dataverse. This is a big deal. This guy here on the left, he's a really big guy here at Microsoft. So this gives kudos to Michael Aldridge to get him to do this video. I'm really excited about this cooperation between the Dataverse team and Microsoft Access. They did a video here. I urge you to watch that and go through these links here in my blog post so that you can to learn more about this, right? Cloud connectors. But what does this mean? Well, if you or any of your clients use Teams or Microsoft Office 365, you get Teams for free. And earlier this year, around January, they released PowerApps for Teams. Well, every time you create a Power App in Teams, you're using Dataverse, and Dataverse is much more than just SQL Server. It's a collection of tools that come together in the background, automated for you, so that if you, for example, belong to IBM that's got 100,000 users, or 3M that's got the million corporate employees throughout the world, you can create this little Power App, roll it out to your organization, and you don't have to worry about adding servers, load balancers, all the all the plumbing that you had to worry about in the past when you released an app in the before. It's all just managed for you in Dataverse, and that's the biggest misconception that people have about Dataverse. They think it's just Azure data storage. It's not. It's a lot more than that, right? It's a complete platform that allows you to roll out these apps, and they make it really easy, by the way, to port apps. So if you design an app for your organization and you want to migrate that to another organization, you can just zip it up and then unzip it at the other place, and it's done. It's installed for you. So it's really amazing stuff. And there's even a marketplace for PowerApps. I'm thinking about releasing my own PowerApps here at IT Impact so we can sell it in the marketplace. But let's say, for example, that you have a client that has a database, Access database that you created for them, and there is a data collection form, right, where they want to use on an iPad. Well, on the old days, you can use remote desktop client to connect to another workstation that's running Access. But it would be really nice if you had a web app that you can run within Power Apps. So that's the nice thing about Power Apps. You design the Power App. It's all web-based, and then the person can grab an iPad or Android tablet or any other device, a cell phone, for example. You can design the app for your cell phone or a tablet, but it won't convert automatically between the two. So you have to design an app for the iPhone, for the mobile phone, and then you have to design another app for the tablet. But either way, you design the app, they go out in the world to use your app, right? I'll give you a great instance. We got a call from a company that was looking to develop a system where they can go to garage stations and be able to record, okay, I need so many bags of chips and so many boxes of Snickers and M&Ms, right? They want somebody to go into the gas station and see what's missing, what's needed, place an order, and then somebody behind them comes back the next day with to fill out the shelves with all the needed stocks. Well, you could have used a Power App for that. This was years ago. They called us for that. We would probably have designed the Power Apps so they call us again, where you got somebody who's using that Power App to fill out the information. Okay, I need Snickers, I need Pepsi, I need this, I need that. They get back to the office, that data is stored in Dataverse, but now you can use Access to email the vendors, right? So, for example, you can calculate, okay, I need 4 skids of Pepsi products in order to distribute to my 200 gas stations. Well, you could create an order in Access through Outlook by reading that data in Dataverse using this connector, and then send out those emails to your vendors for the supplies that you need to come into your warehouse, and then from the warehouse it gets distributed to all the gasoline stations. So it's just a wonderful way to integrate Dataverse with Access. And all the hype these days is Power Apps, because that's what Microsoft, the full weight of Microsoft behind that. I mean, if we had that full weight behind Access, it would be, the sky would be the limit. But they decided to go with Power Apps, which is great. They've done a lot of investment in that, but it still doesn't do reports. You can't have, it has no reporting capability whatsoever. Access has an amazing reporting capability. So the fact that you can now grab that data and create reports in Access allows you to do the best of both worlds. You have a web app that's running on a tablet and a phone that is collecting data, and then at the same time you can now create an Access database that's tapping into that Dataverse data, those tables, and create reports. So It's really wonderful. The other thing you can do, the other integration you can do is you can use the browser control and access to run the PowerApps. So if you have that same data form that you did in PowerApps and you don't want to redo that work on Access form, you can just launch a browser form, control and a form in Access, point it to your Power App, and now they're using that same form inside your Access application. That's my take on this whole PowerApps Dataverse connector. So please take a look at that. One of the most fascinating aspects of this is the roadmap got updated. Here, I'm going to click on this here, bring up the roadmap. And this roadmap is what the team is working on. And one of the things that they've been working on is the a bug that's been really plaguing people for the longest. He mentioned it's not on here, but they are working on fixing that bug in the roadmap and the email from Aldridge. And that bug is one where it's only as Access backend only, right, that's affected. So a lot of my clients, almost all my clients use SQL Server backend, so we don't see that here at all. And if somebody comes to us and say, okay, I'm having this bug, I just tell them, well, this is migrate to SQL Server because you can't fix the bug. But they're working on a fix for that, thank God. It's been more than 1 year now since they've been working on this. But this is what they're working on here, and let's see what he says in terms of this. Well, this is the one I was referring to, that bug. And let's see, one of the things I'm excited about is the SQL Monitor. So Monitor, now that got pushed out to December 2022, a year from now. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I have to wait a year for that. And then the new model web cloud browser control, support Chromium Edge. That's coming supposedly September 2022. Large address awareness from 2022. Access Dataverse connector that rolled out now. The graph data connector pushed out to March. This has already been done. That's already been done. So they've been focusing a lot of their efforts to this Dataverse, and then all this other stuff got pushed back, unfortunately. One of the things that we want to make sure is that people understand is that there is still ongoing development, right, happening at the Access team, because, I get these calls from people and say, I heard that Microsoft Access is dead. And if I have $1 every time I heard that when the people call in, but I use this as a great example. It says, look, there's still ongoing development. It's the most frequent database, desktop database in the world, most used database desktop in the world. So hard to get rid of it, right, and say no overnight. But I'm really happy about this. So the other thing is, before we go on to the main session, the main topic today is Access User Group got a makeover. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but AccessUserGroups.org got a complete makeover. I'm excited about this. We got a new logo because the prior logo looked like too much like the COVID vaccine, a virus, right? And so we got a new logo. And it's super easy now to migrate between groups. So if you want to go to my group, you can just click here, SQL Server with Access, and go to my group. I need to customize it so that it's a little differentiator, right? Maybe I'll put the SQL Server logo on here and so forth. But yeah, this has been an ongoing effort for us, and really excited to finally see this happening. So please use the website. As you recall, we still have the SQL converter available. That's cool. And Vince Zacharias, who's on this call, helped me develop that. It was he played a major role in this. I would just provide the resources, the programming help, and the hosting. So I'm hoping you guys can leverage this, continue to leverage this by pasting the Access SQL here, have it converted over to T-SQL. And if you have any feedback for Ben in the call or any bugs, please report that by leaving feedback here or leaving comments here for Ben, who's joined us. So thank you, Ben, for that. Don't forget to change the SQL Server version so you know which version you're converting over your T-SQL to. I've been at this client that we just started this week. Actually, today it's the first day. I mentioned this tool to them, and they were really excited about being able to convert their Access queries to T-SQL. And I know some of you who are already on this call who are already using this. So thank you so much for your support on using this tool.
I love that tool. I use it all the time.
Oh, well, I would hope so, Ben. You're the one that designed it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Even Ben, who is great at converting these access queries, because Ben's got this knack where he can just look at an access query. He knows already what the proper syntax is for SQL Server. Even he does that. One of the biggest thing I love about this is you can put a query here and then get the equivalent VBA, and that saves you hours of work right there. Where you can just paste it right into your code in VBA. So it's something to consider. You can do that for both the Access version or the SQL Server version. All right, so those are the news I got for you here, I believe, and let's go ahead and start with tonight's presentation. We're going to do a deeper dive into SQL Server Management Studio. So let me just bring up my SQL Server Management Studio. If you're, and this session is really designed for new people, right? So I appreciate Ben and George and Carl, and I know a lot of you guys are already experts in this, but if you see that I'm errant or I am, you can contribute to the conversation. Please step in. But one of the things I want you to do, if you're new to SQL Server Management, you have to do a couple of things. Number one, you're going to notice that when you're trying to make a change to a table and try to save it, it won't let you save it because changes have been prohibited. So one of the very first things I do when I install this tool is I go to Tools here, Options, and then I go to the designers right here, and I changed that. So let me look for designers right here, and table and database designers, and I uncheck the prevent saving changes that require table recreation. Now, if you're a YouTuber watching this video, so I'm going to pause it here, go into your options, check the designers, and then check that, because otherwise, every time you try and make a change on a table, it will not let you roll that out. And it's a real eye opener for me because I didn't know that every time I change a table in SQL Server, like adding a column, it would trigger this. Almost everything that you do with a table will trigger this option. So if you don't uncheck that, you can't do any changes in SQL Server Management Studio, which kind of defeats the purpose of using it. The second thing I want you guys to do is when you grab this tool is the fact that there is a series of well, I'll leave that for last, but for last, I got a little something I want to show you guys. So yeah, you're gonna make that change. Oh, the other thing is every time you make a change with SQL Server Management Studio, it'll actually show you the T-SQL and blah. So I'm gonna enable that option here again. So auto change scripts. I love this feature. And I'll tell you where I use this feature. I think it's really nice. So I'm gonna enable that again. And I'm gonna come in here in customers table and right click design view. And I'm gonna add a column on here. Right, and I'm going to say mailing address. And I'm just going to call that mailing address and varchar. All right, and it's got 50 characters, all nulls. I'm going to save this, and look what pops up when I save. I get this handy little script that I can change or copy. Right, so it's just and then there's a little checkmark here. And the reason why this is important is now I can copy this. Do you want to save this script to a text file? I'll say yes. And it'll ask me for that text file. So it says customer SQL and puts it on this local disk Windows. I'm never going to find that there. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to save in my documents. Click on save there. And replace whatever is in there now because I'm just testing. Now that I've saved it, I can do Control O as an Oscar, as an open, and then go to my documents here. And then pull that up, right? Customer SQL. Let's take a look at this. First thing it does, it starts a transaction. Why is it that we use it? Always get into habit, by the way, of using transactions when you do update queries or T-SQL. And one of the things you're going to realize is you can basically anything you want via T-SQL that you can do with a graphical user interface. So to me, it's a lot easier to bring up the table in design view, add the column, and save it. But sometimes they won't let you do that. Sometimes companies or clients will say, no, you can't use SQL Server Management, you got to use code for whatever reason. And so this is a great way for you to learn how to properly code adding a column to a table via T-SQL. So if I were to run this T-SQL now, it'll give you an error message because the system already, the table already has that column. But one of the reasons I use this is I will frequently, and I just got a new project where I have to do this, I will frequently inherit an existing SQL Server database that I need to make a ton of changes to, adding indexes, adding columns, changing indexes. And I need to document those changes in beta, right? So I do all those changes in beta. I save all these little scripts. And then when I'm ready to roll it out to production, I just change this up here to go to the proper database, right? By changing here to the database here, the other database may be the production version of the database, and run the script. And now I don't have to worry about remembering what I did to what table or anything like that. And the second thing is it allows you to see and learn about T-SQL, right? Remember, T-SQL is Microsoft's interpretation of SQL ANSI, which is the standard international code. And everybody's got it. Oracle's got their own version of T-SQL. I don't know what they call it. I think it's called P-SQL over there. I'm not an Oracle dev, so apologies to Oracle developers if I made a mistake there with that.
PL SQL.
PL SQL, thank you. So you got the alter table command here, where you had the add column. So as you can probably imagine, there's a remove option here that you can use to remove the table to follow the column. And then you got this escalation, and then you have this commit. Now, why do we use transactions? Well, the reason we use transactions is if it fails, it gets rolled back, right? So it does begin transaction and goes through this and it commits. There's a missing on fail on this that it should be triggered if it fails to roll back the transaction. Or in this case, maybe it's not applicable because rollback, there's only rollback if it fails adding the column, it didn't add the column. But if we had, say for example, your boss says, hey, I want you to update all the prices by 5%. Sometimes you're going to hear a lot these days with the ongoing global supply issues, right? I want you to update everything in the table 5%. I'm tired of eating into my margin every time all these materials go. So just go update everything 5 points. Well, when you do that, if you don't time it right, you might have somebody in Access using the application entering a new price for an existing product or add a new product to your product table, and they're in the process of adding a record, and they got a lock on that table. And when you go do an update query, it's going to fail because you have a write lock on that table. Somebody's creating a new transaction. And so you want to be able to say to your boss, yep, I updated everything 5%. You want to either go through completely or fail and report back it failed. You don't want it to do a partial rollout of the 5% because then you're going to end up with a problem where some prices are 5% more, some are the old price. How do you know which one was the old price, right? Unless you do a comparison on the table beforehand and you save the copy, for example. Always a good idea when you do something like that. So you want to wrap these in transaction. Yeah, somebody was going to mention a comment. All right, that's somebody was commenting. All right, so always get the habit of using transactions, and you won't have a problem in case it fails, especially when they update transactions. I mean, I'm not saying that everything needs to be involved in a transaction. I mean, select statements don't need it. Creating a view doesn't need it. But every time you do an update query, which is update, delete, insert it, you want to wrap those around transactions. Now, there's a template that you can use to create your own templates in SQL Server Management Studio so that when you create a new query, it automatically includes those wrappers. We call those wrappers for transaction wrappers. So yeah, that's what that option is. It allows you to save, right? So you always get into the habit, if you're working on a database that you know you're going to need to save the changes, to enable that and then save these scripts, and then you can merge all these scripts into one massive script if you like, and just run the whole thing in one shot if you're the gambling type, or you can just run them one by one and call them, and you can call this script from another script, the master script, for example, and run it step by step until you roll out all your changes to production. Now it's ready to go. One of the things that I'm thinking about doing for next month, December, is project management techniques when upgrading access to SQL Server. There's a lot of things that we do every time we tackle a SQL Server upgrade project. I really would love to discuss that with you guys next month in December, which would be the second Tuesday of December. And that's going to be December 14th. Where we're going to talk a lot about how to product manager, these kind of projects where you're going from Access backend to a SQL Server backend, or you're going from an existing SQL Server backend to a new SQL Server backend. All the tips and techniques that we use to be able to manage those kind of projects. Okay. So one of the things that I did when I started this, I pressed Control N as a Nancy. So my golden nugget to you guys is get in the habit of using Control N as a new, which is if you come in here and go to new, you'll see it that it's there, right? Already Control N. This starts a new query. When you start a new query, you've already selected a database like I have here. It's going to be up here in the upper portion of the tool. I can then change this to another database if I need to run the query against the other database. So always be present, but in order to be a good developer, you may want to specify the database first before before executing the query, right? So you use that T-SQL statement to select the right database, and then you do your query in order to be safe and sound and not have to regret later that you run your query on the wrong database. But you can technically create a query and then run it on Northwind and then select another database here, and then be able to run it on that database if it's applicable, which probably never is, hardly never is, unless it's an identical copy, like a beta version of the production database. Obviously, not every database is going to have a customer table. So if you try running something on another database, the table may not exist, and you get error messages and so forth. So Control N will launch the query here, and you're not going to get any IntelliSense until you select the from. So I usually get in the habit of saying select space from, and then customers, and now I can go back and I got my IntelliSense here, right? So when I type customers, I can then see the different different fields. If I knew what the fields were for customers, so let me just expand this here so I can show you the columns. All right, so I got company. So if I start doing company here, I can just tab here, right? And I wish I think SQL Monaco Editor, don't hold me to this, but I think SQL Monaco Editor, which is coming next year in Access, Lord willing, will provide this for you in VBA, right? That's what I'm really hoping for. And when you design your query in Access, you get this IntelliSense, right? So I can do company, business, right? I can just tab through this and do it. And notice that this is a terrible example because the field names include spaces. Don't do that, boys and girls, when you can design tables. Make sure your fields don't have spaces, because otherwise you have to wrap in brackets like this. But it's a nice feature that'll do that for you automatically. The other aspect of this is I can just drag fields from here into my query, right? So I can go in here and then do the same thing. Right. Now, when I do this query, I can just come in here and check the syntax, which is Control F5, or I can execute the query with F5 or clicking up here. I'm a keyboard warrior, so I'm always forever pressing F5 on my keyboard to execute that query. And I can see the results of the query. Now, one thing, when I was teaching Access, which I no longer do, I was an instructor and I spent a whole day in a classroom teaching people how to use Access. And I did that for a week and I was done. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exhausting. But when I was teaching queries to my students, I always had axiom. That is, know the answer before you ask the question. The reason I say that is designing queries is almost like an art form, right? I can design a query and Ben can design a query, and his query might look a little different from mine, but they both work. For whatever reason, they both work, right? Because there's subtleties about that, about querying. And so I always tell my students, when you design a query, you have to figure out, okay, if the results are right. You have to prove that the results are right. It's not just, yeah, that looks about right. You need to prove it, because these queries are going to be later on used by reports. And if you hand the report to upper management that is wrong, it's going to go on to doubt the entire application, right? The last thing you want to do is be accused of having the application that's just not working right. And so how do I do this? So how do I know this query is correct? Well, I can open this database table independently, right, by coming in here and selecting top 1,000 rows, for example, and I get my my 29 rows. There's only 29 rows. If you look down here, it tells you it's 29 rows. So I know when I come over here and do my other query, and I select star and I see 29 rows, they're both matched. So that's a great way to double check. However, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes the queries do calculations and they do all kinds of stuff in terms of manipulating the data. And so it's important then that you use another method. And one of the methods I love using is Excel, right? So I'll use Excel to query the database using Excel's great query tools and achieve the same conclusion that I do with my query to validate my query in SQL. I know that's a little extreme, and to some people might go, that defeats the purpose. But like I said, I want to be able to prove to my client that my complex query is working correctly. How is I going to prove that, right? I need to use another tool like Excel to be able to achieve the results and be able to compare both and submit them to my client and say, okay, this is what I did in Excel, and it matches exactly what I did in SQL Server. So it's another great thing about another great way of doing this is if you have an Access backend, right, that you're migrating to SQL Server, and you have an Access query that you converted to a SQL query using that great SQL tool at AccessUserGroups.org, well, you can use the old Access application, right, and validate your new query versus the old query. Now, word of caution there, sometimes the old Access database is wrong too, right? I had this case where we were developing this very complex piece of software. It's still an ongoing project. We're a union here in the Chicago area, and they have more than 30,000 members. And what happens is the union creates an invoice for the company, and the company then sends them a $1.2 million check the next week for the union dues that they collect on their members. Well, that's a big deal. If my query is off by a couple G's, that's a couple of $1,000, right? And so what I said, I told my team, validate the new system versus the old system. But don't automatically assume the old system is correct, because if you run into problems, you want to double check. And it turned out that was the case. The old system was not crediting dues where it should be, and all kinds of issues. And that was a perfect example where you have to really validate using Excel and be able to compare the results, right? So in that case, we compare the new system results with the old system results in Excel, and we noticed these discrepancies. And when we dug in deeper, we realized the results were wrong in the old system. And so I was able to take that Excel analysis to the client and prove to them that their old system is not working correctly. All right. So always know the answer before you ask the question when you're validating queries. So I love this drag and drop feature, right, of the fields into the queries here, and being able to easily see, for example, any constraints on this system, right, and also any indexes. But one of the biggest things that you hear from established SQL experts is triggers are a bad thing. Like, this table doesn't have any triggers, but triggers can cause issues, right, with a table. So if you want to see triggers on a table, you can just hit here. So you can see pretty much anything you want. Statistics are very important. They're used as an advanced class, and I'm going to tell you where you can learn more about this stuff, by the way, later on in the evening. But it allows you to see all this stuff. Besides, now when you go in design view, so here's the thing. I need to add an index, for example. So I'll come into the table for customers, and I need. Okay, so here, if I go into Table Designer and go with Index Keys, I say, okay, I got a city, I got a company, I got a first name, last name, postal code. So I need to add an index. So I'm going to show you how to do this, because this is not intuitive for the first time newbie. I'm going to click on the add bit here. When you add an index, it automatically shows up here, and then you can pick the column. So I'm just going to go in there and pick another column. And I'm going to say, all right, job title. All right, I'm just going to add this first example. And I have my job title index. And now it's important that you modify the name. I usually like to say, okay, the index has a little bit of information about what it's about. So I'll just put job title. customers, right? Or customer's job title, whatever methodology you want to use, just stick to it throughout the project. And then one thing you want to do is you want to be careful with this is unique. What does that do? Because if you listen, for example, you have an issue where you cannot have a repeat of job title in this table, right? For whatever reason, it's just a bad example because job titles will repeat. But let's say, for example, in this case, I don't want job titles to repeat in this table. Well, I will select this to yes. And when I save this table, it's going to check to see that indeed it's unique. And if it is, it'll save the change. Otherwise, it'll come back with error and says, hey, you can't do that because it turns out there's more than one customer has that same job title, right? So I'm going to try and do that now. Let me see. I'm going to click close. I'm going to say save. And there it is, right? Unable to create index because there's a duplicate key. But that's a great way of creating an index that's going to limit, right? Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need an index that's unique. And you want to avoid the fat fingering the people and data corruption. You want to use the index to enforce that, right? Here's the handy save to text file to analyze the results later. So that's how, and then here's the begin transaction again. Create the unique non-clustering index. I'm not even going to get into a discussion about non-cluster versus cluster index, but you may want to look that up. So I'm going to say no, I don't want to say that. So that's how you add indexes to the table. Index is important, right? And one of the biggest issues when you migrate to SQL Server for new Access developers going to SQL Server, I'm sorry, let me take that back. Existing Access developers who are learning to use SQL Server is that Access does a lot of great things for you. One of them is automatically add indexes to your table if there's an ID at the end of the field, right? So for example, in the order table, I might have the customer table. So let me close this and open up the order table, not save it. And I'm going to come in here and collapse this and go to orders. And I'll set design view. Okay. And I forgot the customer ID here, right? Well, in Access, every time you end the field name with an ID, it automatically creates an index. Now, these are foreign keys, and they need indexes. All right. And the order table does need an index. So if I come in here, table designer, and do index keys, because I imported this from Access, it should have a customer ID already in there. And there it is, the first one here, right? And it's a non-cluster. It's not unique because otherwise you could only have one order for that customer ever in the history of the order table. So you have to do that manually. The whole point of that discussion is you have to do that manually, right? So you have to add your indexes, your secondary key foreign keys, indexes here. The second thing you need to know is make sure that every table has a timestamp field. Now, there's a huge discussion in the community to this day. SQL Server 2019 is still called timestamp. It really is a raw version. But this is something that we talked about over and over again throughout this two prior sessions. I'm not going to hamper too much on this, but make sure every table of yours has a timestamp. If you want to know under what circumstances you should not have a timestamp field, you should do a search on the web for Armin Stein's blog. He has a great article, and maybe George can post that here. But when you can use timestamp, when not to use. I always use timestamp on all my tables. Armin does explain some certain situations where you shouldn't use timestamp or may not use timestamp. I always do. And that's one of the reasons why I asked you to configure the SQL Server Migration Assistant in the prior Academy session, the first or second Academy session, to always include a timestamp for you when you upgrade upsize this table. And because this was upside with SQL Server Migration Assistant, it automatically use that moniker SSMA underscore there for the sort of field name. All right. So look that up, Armin Stein timestamp on the web. I'm sure you'll come across that post. Now, another thing you have to watch out is the bit field. And we talked about this a little bit last time. Don't forget, when you ever have a bit field, you have to default value 0. Otherwise, you're going to have errors in Access. So if I were to add a bit field here, I'm going to say, okay, unique order, right? It's a yes, no field. So I'm going to type it, I'm going to make it a bit field. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to uncheck allow nulls, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say the default value is 0. Right, and that's how I handle bit fields when I add them to my table in Designer. I make sure that their default value. Why is the allow null? Why do I uncheck allow nulls? Because the bug in Access will occur if there's no value for that big field. If you don't uncheck allow nulls and you add the table to the database, when I save the table to database, it'll be null for that value. If I uncheck any default value 0, it's going to add a 0. So let's go ahead and save this. See how I look when I'm talking about. I'm going to say no to that. And now I'm going to do the, I'm going to check the orders table. I'm going to say 1,000, first 1,000 rows. And I'm going to come here to the end. Notice that unique order is 0. So always add 0 as your default for bit fields in order to avoid that bug in Access. Now I have a blog post on AccessExperts.com. It talks about how to properly design tables with SQL Server. You may want to look at that later on. All right. Now, when you come from Access, people love, I use it all the time, the QBE, right? Created by example, right? So I'm going to go into Access here. And I'm using this on the monitor here. Remember that tip I gave you where you can have multiple desktops? Like if you do Window tab, you see these desktops here at the top. I'm at desktop number 2. And if I go into Create, Query Design, and I can just drag these tables, right? So I'm going to say, okay, I want the customer table and I want the employees. Let's say I want the order table, right? That there should be a natural link between the two, which it doesn't. So I have to manually do this here because Microsoft did a terrible, terrible design of this database. So I have to come over here and do this. I should have done it automatically, but it didn't happen. So this is query by example, right? So if you ever wonder what this was, some people call it the query window. I'm a old Paradox for Windows guy back in the old day when Paradox was reigned supreme. It was called QB back then. And that's why I keep calling it. So I can then come here and right, and I can just double click on fields. Well, you have the same capability in SQL Server, right? So if I come over here to SQL Server, back to desktop number 1, and I'm coming here and I decide to do a query. I'm going to do Control N. That's a Nancy. And then I'm going to come in here to the query menu, design query and editor. And I can pick those same tables, right? So I'm going to say, okay, customers and orders. And look at that. Hot dog. It did the relationship there automatically with access into it. And then I can just pick my company name and my order ID. So when I was new with SQL Server, this is what I would do, right? I mean, I just didn't know how else to do it because this takes care of the syntax. And one thing I love about this is that dual. This is by the way I believe is with SQL Monaco when it comes to SQL Monaco. But you have that dual area where you can see the columns down here and you see the T-SQL down here, right? And so that's another way how I learned T-SQL. We make changes up here at the top and I see reflector, right? So let's go ahead and do that here. I'm also going to add another field here, and I'm going to say order date, right? And automatically identify which table it was, orders, right? I can actually change the table from here by doing the drop down and picking customers that I wanted to, but in this case, it doesn't allow me to do that. And I can give it an alias. So if I want to say order date without the column space, I can do that. And notice that it automatically adds order date as order date here down at the bottom, which is great. I can also have done this down here. So if I come in here and I do a comma, and now I add employee ID bracket, employee ID bracket, and I click up here, I believe it will automatically format it up here as well. See? Yep, it did that. Right? So automatically adds it here. Now, this is an interesting option. You don't have to output it. Now, what is output? Well, that is, for example, a query, right? So, for example, if I want to say a criteria, excuse me. So if I say order ID, right? And I say, okay, let's see here, sort order. Let me expand this so I can see. And I can come in here in the filter and see greater than 1,000. I'm just making stuff up here. Notice that the output was automatically unchecked, but if I want to see this output, I can just do that. And now it automatically recognizes that order ID was already included in the query. Now you're going to have another column called expression 1. So that's one of the reasons why it unchecked it for you automatically. So love this duality of this. And then if you have additional ORs, right, order ID greater than 1,000 and less than 100, right, I can do that here, and I can see how SQL Server is handling that, the ORs and so forth. And then I click on OK. That's going to return it back to my to SQL Server Management Studio, because you're used to in Access, right? If I go back to Access, you're used to going into the query design window here and clicking View to see the outcome of your query. And there's something wrong with that. But if I run here and I click on Execute, it'll do that for me. Now, if you make a change here, I'm going to show you how to go back into query by query QB again. So I'm going to say, you know what? I want this to be less than 50. Right, but for example, you may want to add a third table and a fourth table, and that's pretty hard if you don't know T-SQL. So I always recommend when you get first starting out is to select the query itself, right, and then you can right-click, I believe, right here and here to click on the query design query editor, and then make your change, like ship name. I'm gonna add ship name, and then I'm gonna click on OK, and now it returns it back to SQL Server Management Studio. So over time, what you're going to realize is you're going to learn and pick up the stuff, and you can automatically create these small queries. And you're not going to use, trust me on this, eventually you're not going to use much QB as much. And some SQL Server snobs are like, oh man, come on, you don't tell me you're using QBE, right? I mean, that some people, I remember when I first started this 20 years ago on this journey. And I believe I was at a client site that had a SQL Server DBA, and he was kind of like laughing at me a little bit because I was using the QB for super simple queries because I didn't know better, right? And like I didn't know SQL. I wanted to double check, make sure I was doing good, and so forth. So he was kind of laughing it off. He didn't say anything, but I saw the smirk on his face when I noticed he was doing this. But I still use it to this day. So this is a great way to learn T-SQL and be able to get the nice formatting here. Now, so that's another great tip, right? Just use the QB. And then once you have these results, now sometimes you'll have a really long query and it'll be obscured by its results. So I'm going to simulate that here. I'm going to drag this up here, right? And you have your query. Now I lost the where clause, and you want to see, okay, where I need to see my query. You just press Control R as in Robert, and it'll go away. So the results window says Control R. That'll go away, and now you can see your query here. If you want to see the results again, you press Control R again, it comes back. You can adjust these. Again, this is for, a lot of you guys probably know this but this is for beginners. I have to cover this. All right, so Control R is really neat. Learned that the hard way. I didn't know that at the beginning, but I learned that the hard way. Now, you notice I have multiple queries up here. Sometimes you need to see them side by side. So one of the things I love about this, I wish Access did this. You can right-click on a tab here, and you can start a new, I think it's I'm going to try both of these. I'm going to try the new horizontal, and now you've got them like this, right, stacked. Or if I close this and I come in here and I do a new vertical tab group, now I can have them side by side, which is sometimes pretty convenient. Where you can see a prior version, you can run them both. You can have multiple queries, right? It's just a pretty neat way to be able to have these here. You can also drag them, right? So if I want to, I can just drag this one over here to this one, and now I've got this one over there, and I can organize these. Sometimes this database window is in the way, so I'll just click on auto hide and it'll disappear over here, and if I need to bring it back, I'll just click here, and if I need to pin it again, I'll just pin here. So learn how to, all these tips and tricks is going to help you tremendously when you're developing this. Of course, I can resize this. Now, sometimes I work with projects that has hundreds of tables. I mean, that's just the reality of a complex system. Like today, I visited a new customer, and they use Access as their ERP system for this whole factory, 60 employees, and it's just unbelievable how complex this database system is. And so it's got hundreds of tables. And so sometimes you go by the alphabetical list, and if you have a very popular C, like customers, clients, code, and whatever tables that start with C, letter C, You can, after a couple late in the afternoon when you've been here for many hours looking at that monitor, sometimes you just can't find it, or you want to see every instance of order. So for example, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to filter this. I'm going to right click on tables. I'm going to say filter settings. Now I want every name that contains the word order. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type order and click OK. And now that shows me every table that it has order. You can do the same thing with views and store procedures, right? And it's a super convenient way to be able to filter this list. If I want to remove the list, notice it's highlighted up here. I can just remove that and click on clear filter, and now I get them all back. Super convenient when you have a database system that has many tables. The other aspect of this, sometimes you have a really long query and you know that you need to do a replacement, right? For example, here I want to, let's say for example, I want to do an alias. I want to say as C, right? Well, I did that. Notice that now I'm getting error messages, right? It doesn't know what customers is. So I can easily, of course, come in here and change this in both places, or I can click here, and I believe if I hide Control H, it already have my list, and I'm going to say, all right, C dot. Whenever it says customers, I got put the dot in the back end of this, otherwise I'm going to problems. Every time it says customers dot, I'm going to replace it with C dot, an alias for that table. I can do replace next or replace all, and I do that. And now it's gone, right? So Control H, which also works in Office. Anywhere in Office, Access, Excel, Word, Control H is a universal in Microsoft products to do search and replace. Control F to find. Also another one. Aliasing is a great way for you to both reduce the text in the query and be able to better understand where the fields come from, right? And so I know C for customer, I can do the same thing for O for orders and so forth. And get in the habit of using aliasing that way. It just helps you with be able to manage your queries. All right. When it comes to that underline, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add a new table. I'm going to show you the problem that I used to have at the beginning, and I resolved it the hard way by realizing. So I'm going to start a new table here. I'm going to just say test ID, and this is going to be int, right? Integer. All right, and I want this to be my primary key. I can just right click right here and set primary key. Now, if I want this to be auto incremented, I need to come in here, and this is important because it's very easy to make it. It's called auto increment and access. Right here, it's not called auto increment. It's called identity specification. So if you click down here in the properties of the table, you're going to come in here and you're going to say identity yes. And one of the things I love about SQL, I wish Access does this, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but one of the things is you can start, you don't have to start at 1. I'm going to tell you exactly why you would not need to start at 1 sometimes. So if I want to say, I want to start at 1,000, I can do that. I can even change the increment. So if I want to do customers at intervals of 10 each, that's even great, which you can't do in Access, right? So this identity column specification is what auto increments. So identify entity with auto increments. So I'm just going to save this TBL test. All right, and I got it actually gives me all the SQL to create that table, which is pretty cool. So you know that. Now I've got my table test. And if I go in here and I don't see it here, golden nugget number 10, just right click here and refresh to see this table. Now I've got this table here called test. And if I want to edit this table, right, edit 200 rows, obviously it doesn't have any rows because I just started. I can, well, how do I insert a field here? If there is no additional field, that's my problem. Let me go ahead and modify the design again. This time I add another field. So I can't figure out how to add it. So this is a test name. All right, and varchar 50 allow now. So I'm going to save this. And now I'm going to right click and select edit 200 rows. Okay. John, Jane. All right, so look how it's incrementing 1 and 1. I thought it's incremented by 10 or something like that. Maybe I didn't save it or anything. I got this, John Jane. All right. When, under what circumstances would you start your seed in any other value than 1? Under what circumstances? I'll tell you a great circumstance. You're migrating from an older version of the system into SQL Server Express. You can tell the system to jump. Say for example, I migrate this right now. Customers, like I told you before, has let me close this. So customers has here 29 rows, right? And if I include the company ID or your customer's company ID, let me see here. Customers. Let me see. Customer, what is it called? Actually, let me just show you the table fields and then just grab it here. So customers. You can't go by what Microsoft. This is a terrible design of the table. All right. ID. All right. Gosh, don't ever use the word ID for your primary keys. All right, so I got ID. Okay. So notice that this one has 29. Well, quite frequently, what I'll do is when I do a Access to SQL Server migration project, is I'll tell my customer, I'm gonna start the customer company IDs at 100. And that way you know which customers got created with the new version of the system. Because they all start with 100, 101, so forth. That's a great reason to do it. Now, one thing that I love about SQL Server that you can't do with Access as well is to be able to insert values into the customer table by turning off the identity and then doing your inserts and then turning it back on. So that's a complex case, but you may want to look it up on the web. There is a way for you to use T-SQL from Access to insert records, but you can't do with Access. So say, for example, I want to insert 10 records with specific IDs, right? I don't know, but here's a good example. Somebody went in and they deleted record number 29. They call me up and say, hey, I deleted 29 accidentally. But customers, can you restore that for me from backups? I'm sure I can restore from backups. So I'll come in here and I'll say, okay, restore my backup, and record number 29 belongs to a company called, let me see here, CC, right? Well, if I insert this record from backup and I don't assign value 29, I might end up messing the entire schema because obviously company ID is using an order table as 29, not as 30, right? Which is with the next value it should use when I insert the record. So you need to turn identity specification off in your query, do the insert from your backup at 29, then turn it back on. That way it'll let you insert the record there, because that's a bad example. This is the last record, and I wouldn't do the insert, maybe do something else, but actually I do inserts because it'll just pick up 30, right? So I do need to suspend it, then insert, do my insert, and then restart it. So that's a great example. And that's something you can't do in Access. You can't believe. Okay, somebody says can't. Well,
Yeah,
let's
you
see.
can.
So there you go. See, that's why I got you guys here to help me out with this. Thank you, Kim, for that.
Yeah, I had a real world example. We had a corruption in a table. So we just inserted that record back in that way from a backup.
Okay. With SQL Server?
No, it was in Access.
And Access. Okay, great. All right. So
it wasn't easy, but it was
it
possible.
wasn't easy. Okay. Here it's super easy to do, suspend the insert, right? And then do that again. Just search the web, how to that case for the proper T-SQL for that.
In Access, it's not too difficult. You have to write a query for that, an insert query, and then you can use the numbers.
Okay. Do I have to do anything to turn off the primary key or anything like that, or?
I don't think so. But
okay.
Yeah, I think as long as there's no conflict,
the insert query, a normal insert query.
Yeah, I think as long as there's no, I think as long as there's no conflict, it'll work pretty.
Okay. All right. I know in SQL Server you have to turn off identity insert in order to insert values and then turn it back on again. All right. So look, I can stand here all night and give you all kinds of tips and tricks and all that, but I always urge people, right? This is my last golden nugget of the session. I always urge people, you gotta get in the trenches. You gotta do this. I mean, this is amazing. for you as an Access developer, Access consultant to learn this stuff. Because let me guarantee you, all it takes is just one project, and you're going to become an expert on this. I really do. It's not that difficult. It's not impossible, right? It's not like you have to know the internals of SQL Server in order to maximize the potential and help your clients or your company out when doing this stuff. You got to get into it, right? So those of you who have not yet done a SQL Server upgrade project, just get into it, hammer it out, and you're gonna find that we're gonna find several things. Number one, you're gonna find the experience lovely because SQL Server Management Studio is just a great tool. I wish we had something equivalent in Access, but we don't. So you're gonna love doing the IntelliSense. Oh, by the way, I added that table test, and there's a reason I added a table test. I guess it's not my last nugget. I added this table test, and the reason being is when I come in here and I say, okay, select star from test, TBL test. Notice that it doesn't show up in IntelliSense, and then it's just, I don't know what, there is a table test. I know it because I created it, it is. So if I execute, it works fine. But here you got this thing. So press Control R, Shift Control R, excuse me, to update the IntelliSense. So Shift Control R will update the IntelliSense. Now it's gone. And now when I come in here, I can actually select right columns, right test ID. So Shift Control R will, test ID is a column, will refresh IntelliSense. And trust me, the old days I would stop SQL Server Management Studio, go back in, and then it would refresh IntelliSense. No need to do that, right? There is something in the tools menu, I believe, that does that for you. And it's somewhere up here you can refresh IntelliSense. I don't know where it's at, but somewhere up here you can do that.
I personally have a nugget, that is a book, a free book, which I did the link in. It's from Dr. From Down Under. And it has thousands of tricks in SQL Server, SSMS.
Which book is that?
Here, SQLDownUnder.com.
Can you post that link in the chat? I'd love to see that.
It's already there.
I did.
Okay,
I
thank you.
already
Thank
did.
you.
I will copy that over into the comments on the YouTube video as well.
Thank you. Thank you, George. You're a lifesaver. All right.
It's you may know Dr. Greg Lowe. Greg is also an MVP.
Oh, good, good. So Cesardo, who is on this call, he is an employee of mine. He was kind enough to join us. And he has some tricks up his sleeve when it comes to SQL Server Management Studio. And I'm going to demonstrate these for you tonight as my final topic here. So let me go ahead and show you the tricks, and you can do a screenshot while you have it up here. Give me a second. Let me bring it up. He was walking me through these earlier today. All right, here we go. Okay. So he has these shortcuts that he's added to the his environment, keyboard environment, where you can use these to get information. So I'm going to do window right and then do window left. And there's now I got both of these there. So window right, window left allows you to snap the programs back and forth, right? And so here, if I want to, I can then, oh boy, I didn't want to show you all that confidential information in the background there. There you go. All right. So I'm going to start a new query here. Let's say no to that. By the way, you can save these files. Like I can show you before. Like if I create this query and I want to save it, you can just press Control S to save it, then to give it a name. I'll put OK to delete. That way I can delete it later. And then you can just press Control O and go back to it. It's just a handy way to save your SQL code. But I've got these. I was playing around with this earlier. So I got these two tables, customers and invoice. And I went into Tools, Options, Environment, Keyboard. So I'm going to go into Tools, Options, Environment, and Keyboard. I'm going to pause here. So if you are keyboard shortcuts, query shortcuts, there you go. So I'm going to expand this. So go ahead and take a snapshot of this, the screen. And what I like about this is super convenient, right? And you can pretty much customize your own. So you have Control A, Control 9, Control 0 still available. So I'm going to show you how this works. He was doing this on the call with someone the other day. I'm like, how did you do that? And I was like, okay. So select top 100 from. Notice that the from doesn't specify table because it gets inserted automatically. So that's Control 3. So I press Control within 3, it automatically runs that query for me. That was pretty handy. And then I want to see how many count there is. I press Control 4 to see what how many counts records are. So the old days I had to select count customer ID from customer table. I don't have to do that. I can just press Control 4 and do that. And there's some really nice ones here, like the Alt F1, I believe, tells you some information. Let me do Alt F1. Yeah, I love this one because let me just expand this so you can see the Alt F1 results. Because it tells you the name of the table, all the columns, right? Any indexes, any constraints, any foreign keys. It's just a great handy way of doing that. So, Cesaro, thank you so much for these tips. I've now passed this on to universe forever and ever in your YouTube channel. So thank you. If anybody else has any handy tricks that you use with these, let me go ahead and bring that back up again. Anybody else have any? You can play with these, see what the other ones do. But those three, I think, are the most useful for me. Something to keep in mind to do. All right. So please do that. All right. So any comments on today's session? Any comments? Thank you so much for chiming in, guys. I mean, I'm not all knowing Mahawani here. I appreciate you guys helping me out with these presentations. Anybody else have anything you'd like to mention? I'd like to open the board now for any questions.
I always change the select 1,000 to select 10,000 or so, and the edit to more than 200.
Okay, so what Carl is talking about is
Klaus, not
Klaus, is that you have the select top 1,000. Sometimes you want to see more, like if you want to do 100,000, you can
Yes,
have more
because
shortcuts.
if you have fast, if you know that the database is on your own server or PC, then you know that you always don't have to wait for 10,000 lines to show. So you can easily show 10,000 lines to select, and let me say 2,000 or 5,000 edit rows. As well, in that book I mentioned, there's a trick where you can select the SQL statement in the edit so that you can edit that select statement as well.
Okay.
And
all right.
that Mr. Lowe also has some very advanced SQL SQL stored procedures. But the good thing is that for each stored procedure he has a film to that.
Okay.
To explain.
All right. I have not seen this book, so I definitely would like to go to this. Thank you so much for that and doing this. I have a new employee starting next Monday, junior SQL DBA in my staff, and I'm
that's
referring
why
to
I
this.
mentioned it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Anything else? Any guys who have more question about this about this presentation, or anything else you'd like to comment, or any issues you have with SQL Server you'd like to discuss?
I like to turn on line numbers, especially if I'm working with someone else, and we can talk back and forth and point to the line numbers, and that's easy to do in the options.
All right. So let me walk you through this. So I'm going to options. Where do I go?
The easiest way to do is just use the search bar at the top, which is really nice to have up there to search. At the top of options.
So
nope. Go to tools options.
Options.
At the top of the options window, there's a search.
Okay. Great
so
tip.
just put the word line in there. And pick the last element in the tree, the last one in the tree there. Yep. The last general, sorry. And there's line numbers halfway down.
Okay.
So
all right. Nice.
when you're doing a demo, people can say, no, it's on line 14, not line 15.
All right. Thank you.
Another feature I like to turn on is you can have 2 rows of tabs at the across the top of the screen. What I like to do is I put my pinned tabs on the second row. So the queries I'm really focused on, like say I'm writing a view, and you can pin, you see how there's a little pin symbol up there. It'll put the pinned ones, it'll jump them up to a little higher row above that one. So the view you're working on will stay up there, and then every other little query you open to try to figure out what you're doing, because probably open up a ton of windows, they will go on a different row.
I love that. That's great. Thank you, Ben, for that. Appreciate it. Wendy wants to know, how can you easily show the execution plan, and what are the key things to look for when you do the show execution plan? Well, the easiest way, I believe, is to select the query and pressing Control L's on Larry, and that will show you the execution plan down here. And then I'll be the first one to admit, I am not a tweaker of execution plans. I have a SQL Server DBA on staff that I call into question when I do this. But some people can go look at this execution plan and say, well, that doesn't look right. And, you know, I've been doing this for more than 25 years, and I've never modified execution plan. Never had a need to execution plan. It's pretty good. And the nice thing about this is the newer version of SQL Server just getting better and better. They update these execution plans on the fly, and this especially 2019 just does amazing stuff in the background for you to optimize. If you ever host a database in Azure, you're gonna get recommendations via email saying, "Hey, we noticed that your performance of your database can be improved if you create this index." And then you can click a button and it'll create the index for you. So that's SQL Server 2019 working to optimize the execution plans. But what I love about this tip, Control L, is if it's missing an index, it will actually offer to an index here. You saw that in the prior session we had last month. And then I can just copy those new index details and be able to easily create the index. Thank you, Wendy, for that. Appreciate it. Anybody else has any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms? Look, I understand this has been a very short class on SQL Server Management Studio, but I do urge you to get into the thick of things and be able to start using it.
I found this 2 stored procedures from Ola's Halmgren backup and restore. He has a special stored procedure, not for backup, but also for the indices, which he automatically reuses, or he makes new.
So he's using a store procedure to do what?
To recreate the index.
Recreate the index, okay.
And another one for checking of the status of the database.
Okay.
A very complex one.
Okay.
And
so what Klaus is referring there is sometimes you'll create a new SQL Server application from scratch. Excuse me. Wow, sorry about that. Sometimes thank you. So sometimes you create a new application from scratch. And usually you start with 10 rows maybe. And so what's happened, I've had some cases in the past where a client is using my application for a year and they're calling me up, Juan, the system for some reason is getting slower and slower. And I know what's happening there. It's just that it needs additional indexes. And I couldn't foresee that when I first designed the database. You know, in spite of all the things I did, I make sure my foreign keys and indexes and so forth. But I couldn't foresee it because every time I ran a query, it was super fast. Of course, it only had 10 records. It's a new application, but you know, a year after in it, they may have 100,000 orders, and then 10,000, 100,000 orders, then you know, millions of lines of order in the order details table. And by then you realize, okay, I need these indexes and so forth. Now, obviously, it's hard. It's always hard when you're not proactive, right? I always tell my people, when you want to be proactive, you want to manage the application, not reactive, and having customers calling you and say, hey, it's slow. And so we always make a point in our calendar to revisit the application again, maybe 6 months into it, so that we can do it. Thank you, Klaus, for those in the chat. He's talking about these store procedures. Where can I get those store procedures, by the way? It's already included with that SQL Server. Klaus?
What do you mean? That stored procedures are all there.
Oh, they're okay. They're
Just
already
captured.
included. Okay. All right. These
You
store
have
procedures are
just
already there.
to create one stored procedure, and that one creates the other ones. There's a main stored procedure which is he creates in the master database.
Okay. All right.
But you can create it in other databases as well. Don't need to do it in the master.
Okay. Sounds good. All right.
At least it's worth to look at.
Okay.
Are you out of time?
No, go ahead. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah, there's a feature in here called Edit Top 200. Did you go over that?
Edit top 200. Yeah, that's what I use to create that. When I create a new table, I have table test. I right click here. I click on Edit top 200 rows to bring it up and add records.
Okay. I wasn't fully paying attention when you went over that, but I was going to point out that when you're in this mode, you can hit the control key, control 1, control 2, control 3, control 4 to toggle. If you hit control 1 right now, it'll show you the SQL or the table view. Yeah, this is like the QBE.
Nice.
So you do control 2, you get that, control 3. So there's the SQL. So, and those are buttons. You can see them in your toolbar. They're now depressed, kind of right in the middle there. So,
Oh, thank you so much, man.
I'm working on a query, but I wrote this. I posted this on Twitter, asking if somebody knew if there was a hotkey to bring that up, because sometimes I'm in a query, and I want to just get this view as an editor without pulling up the QBE, because the QBE, the problem with it is it's a modal window.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no way I found to give a hotkey. Now, you did show us that hotkey thing. I never thought about that, but I don't think like the hotkey builder that you showed us earlier in the options, that doesn't. Is there a way to pull this up?
Yeah, the control 1. I guess if I go into tools, options, and keyboard, right? Environment, keyboard here, query shortcuts. This control 1 is SP who, control 2 SP lock. So there might be a conflict there between this control 1 and the other control 1 you showed me earlier. How do I get back to the results?
My point was that those keyboard features you just showed probably just put words in, but they don't automate.
Yeah,
it's not like a macro. But I was hoping to have a hotkey I could hit to bring up this editor, because it's more powerful than the regular SQL editor, just the plain text editor. It's a kind of a hidden nugget in here.
I like that. Now there is a quick way to get help right away, and it's Twitter. And I got to really get going, but this is, let me bring up a new window here, my Twitter account. Let's see, I think I may have it in my Chrome. Control T, Twitter.com. If you ever get stuff and you need, I don't know what these people do. They just jump in right away. But if I ever do the hashtag SQL help, how do I quickly pull up the tables in my query? And I do hashtag SQL help. The SQL Server community is monitoring this, and you'll quickly get somebody to chime in. So I'm just going to go over here and search Twitter here and do SQL help. And I've been in some binds here in the past, And I've been able to get the SQL Hub. Anyone here work for Microsoft or have a direct contact for SQL licensing questions? Have a client wants to get some answers directly from the source. And how do I get that good discussion here? Oh, here it goes. All right, so people already chime in. Danny Sherry is famous, SQL Server consultant. I've actually talked to him in the past. Did you know about the SQL help tag in Twitter, Ben?
You know what? I've heard about it, and I didn't use that when I posted. I used #SQL Server because I forgot it was SQL help. So I'm going to post it again because I posted mine in June. I'll post it again and see.
So word of caution, use this hashtag once inappropriately. I'm not going to say whatever circumstances, inappropriate. And I got yelled at. It says, no, you're not going to use that to announce your I think it was to announce my SQL Server with Access Academy. It's not for that. It's only for people looking for help. And I'm like, okay, sorry. and I had to quickly retract. So they're pretty rigid about, this hashtag. They monitor it, police it. I mean, honestly, I can do what I want. They're not going to come into my home here and stop me from doing it. But I want to stay in my good graces of the organization. All right, there is a final tip, I believe. You guys remember there used to be a SQL Pass? Well, it's coming back. Let me see if it already passed. I'm not sure. SQL Pass, Redgate, SQL Pass organization passed away, and it's no longer a community. But Redgate picked it up, and now it's back. So Redgate is sponsoring it, and here you can see that they're top now. It should be. Let's see here. So there is what's next. There's a summit coming up shortly here, and you can register for it. Let me see here in events. Beyond Regret. Register for past data community. So here you go. So when is this? Did it already pass? It's about learning. It's about connecting. Okay, November 8th to the 12th. So it's happening right now. So I'm going to put this in here. But please register if you can and go. These are some really good tracks, and you can see some really good stuff. I love the SQL Pass. I always presented my sessions, never got picked for one. But I love the fact that Redgate picked up these assets and they're going to help the community out. I wish Microsoft had stepped in, but they decided to take a pass and not help the organization that was in debt for millions of dollars, and they had to close, which was regrettable. They were the responsible ones for SQL Saturday. I think, let me see if I go to SQL Saturday. Is that still a thing? I haven't done that in a while. I used to present a lot. And I'm not sure if I've met Ben and I have ever been to SQL Saturday together. Well, that's still going, so that's good. Well, no super events together this time. I'm sorry. There's a SQL Live, Dev Intersection, Las Vegas, Stockholm. All right. Well, look, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I really appreciate you guys attending. I do this because you guys show up, and so I appreciate my regulars, Klaus and Cesardo from the Philippines. I know it's been you've been up all night working for our stuff, and now you decide to stick around. So appreciate that. Wendy, thank you for your question. Kent as well, and of course Ben Sackrich for being an amazing guy to help us with the SQL converter. We'll probably talk about elements of project management the next month. I'm working on a surprise, and I can't tell you what it is, but hopefully if I get that, I'll switch the topic. A surprise guest for our next month's meeting, but I can't announce it unless they confirm. This has been Juan Soto, Chapter President of SQL Server with Access of AccessUserGroups.org. If you've been watching the video, please hit subscribe and also hit the bell to get alerted when new videos come online. It does help us tremendously when you subscribe to the channel. So long until December 14th next month. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Juan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.